quality of life for people in Pullman, you know, not create these attractive nuisances with furniture and things like that. So, but there's just a definition of who the responsible person is the agent, lessor, lessee, or other person occupying or having charge or control of the premise, and then the definition of the owner. So,
if not, then we'll close the community comments. Next up is city council member comments, and I'll start with Councilmember Jared.
Thank you. I simply don't believe in name calling. I believe in creating opportunities for people to have conversation and discourse, which is why we found the event on Monday. And that's the end of my comments.
Students were saying, Judge, organizes the protest you're part of for a civil conversation, but you ignored me. Neither of you has ever met an Israeli or contacted an Israeli official to understand the conflict better. It feels like you just want dead Jews, in my opinion.
I feel the root of this for me is whether the ordinance that we decided on way back was something that should have been passed in the first place.
And Jericho can answer this probably better when it comes to the notice of corrections. What I believe is happening is it's just one more way for somebody to get a notice of correction that's automatically dismissed. They can avoid that court process, but then they go right back and do it again.
They violate the Pullman City Code and an infraction is issued, and they've already received a certificate of correction in that calendar year, they have to pay the fine.
So essentially we're penalizing somebody for cleaning up the mess.
No, that's not true.
Is this under Washington code, or we're just saying this is what we feel?
This is Pullman City Code.
I don't like this.
Is it possible to increase from one to another amount?
Council can do whatever it wants. Council can do whatever it wants. Council can do whatever it wants.
It's amazing what you guys do.
I think what you're doing is absolutely marvelous.
One, two, three, four.
What's going on?
You don't. There's no expectation of privacy in public.
It's illegal in Washington to record speech.
It's not though. Yeah, it's the First Amendment.
Aren't you guys recording us though? That's kind of a double standard.
My right to do this is the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, religion, press, petition, and assemble. What's your right to that? I shouldn't do that. Like, you don't want to be recorded. Have a good night. You live in a park. It's paid for by taxpayers. I'm not. It's the First Amendment. That's why I'm doing it. Okay, no, it's not. It matters. It's just about more.
Organizes the protest you're part of for a civil conversation, but you ignored me. Neither of you has ever met an Israeli or contacted an Israeli official to understand the conflict better. It feels like you just want dead Jews, in my opinion. Until you meet with me, otherwise I'm going to assume that you are elected officials wishing for the erasure of Jews and Arab Israelis. I'm here to talk anytime, to sit down with you and have an education session. There is no one probably close that knows more about this than I do. I would love to sit down with both of you, but I don't think you will because you just keep ignoring me. And this is the problem with people on the, I hate to say pro-Palestinian side because I'm pro-Palestinian myself. So,
thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comments? If not, then we'll close the community comments. Next up is city council member comments, and I'll start with Councilmember Jared.
Thank you. I simply don't believe in name calling. I believe in creating opportunities for people to have conversation and discourse, which is why we found the event on Monday. And that's the end of my comments.
Students were saying, Judge.
Councilmember Parks?
No comments.
Councilmember Wright?
No comment.
Councilmember Guido?
No comment.
Councilmember Weller?
No comment.
Councilmember Guerrero?
No comment.
Councilmember Gaither?
No comment.
With that, we're on to future regular agenda requests. Are there any council members who would like to request an item for a future agenda? Seeing none, We're now on to community comments for final action items on the agenda. This agenda item is the second of two opportunities during this meeting for the public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials on any agenda item the City Council will take final action item at this meeting. Is there anyone who would like to provide comments on any final action item? Seeing none, we're then on to presentations. Our first presentation is on the Pullman Nuisance Code, and with that, Jericho. So our code enforcement supervisor, Jericho Don.
Hello. Alright, so I just put together a little slide here with PowerPoint just to kind of go over, I guess, some of the things that, we do in the nuisance ordinance. One of those was specifically indoor furniture outdoors, but basically I put up the purpose of the nuisance ordinance is kind of highlighted right there. It's right in the city code. It's to basically protect public health, safety, and welfare, prohibit those conditions that create fire or other safety or health hazards. To prevent those conditions that contribute to the degradation of the character of neighborhoods and depreciation of property values. I feel like that's a pretty good description of what we do essentially with the nuisance ordinance. So specifically in regard to indoor furniture outdoors, this is number 19 of Pullman City Code 5.01.050. Basically, just as it says, stored or discarded furniture or other household goods or items, including indoor furniture left outdoors in a residential zone or other zone within the city where such items are inconsistent with permitted uses authorized within the zone. Essentially, when the definition of indoor furniture is anything that is originally designed. What is its original purpose? Is it designed to be indoor furniture, or is it designed to be outdoor furniture? A lot of times you get the argument that couch is like 30 years old, it's crusty, it's nasty, so we sit on it outside. And I understand all of that, but basically the definition is that what was its intended purpose? It was indoor furniture, so it can't be stored outdoors. We don't really stop people from sitting on couches outside. I mean, if they're actively using even an indoor couch outside, we usually just pass on that because it's not being stored. That's per how I interpret this, and it's not being left outdoors. It's being utilized. As long as they remove it, we don't give it too much grief. So, and this just basically outlines who's responsible. We can actually issue the infractions to any person, a responsible person, or an owner on the property, and basically all of them. And it can go from the property owner to the property manager to the residents. It's kind of like you can hit a lot of people with a lot of tickets. We don't typically do that. I've actually never done that. That seems pretty harsh to get so many people with a ticket like that. I don't think that's the intent of the city code. I think the intent of the city code is just like it said in the purpose, maintain a certain quality of life for people in Pullman, not create these attractive nuisances with furniture and things like that. So, but there's just a definition of who the responsible person is. It's the agent, lessor, lessee, or other person occupying or having charge or control of the premise, and then the definition of the owner. So, it's basically, it's a class 2 civil infraction for the first offense, and then it's a class 3 civil infraction for any second and subsequent offenses. The city's fine is $250, but the state, as you can see there, adds a PSEA, which is a public service and education assessment. And what they do is they take 70% of the base of what the city has as their fee, they add that onto it, and then they take 50% of that 70%, and then they add that onto it, which is where you come up with the $513. The state requires that that's added. When it goes to court, they won't accept an infraction from us without those PSEAs on it. So that's why it's when you look up there and you see 513, it's quite an infraction. And then if you get a second one, now you're up to $718 because of these PSEAs. If that makes sense. And then essentially with the couch fires, this is just since school started, September 7th, 8th, 14th. There was 4 of them on the 14th, 1 on the 15th, and the 23rd. What happens is the couches are outside. I don't know if they become an easy target just to drag out somewhere and light them on fire. This is patrol responding to a call where these guys are burning a futon in the alleyway behind their apartment. I don't know how long this video goes there. It'll just play in the background. I've got several of them that'll play just to kind of illustrate where these couches typically will get drugged and burned. And it's almost never like on premise. It's like out in the street or on the corner or something along those lines. So in reference to indoor furniture outdoors, this is one of the reasons I believe I was told that it was kind of put into the city code. It's kind of specifically for this kind of things. This was another one. There's like 300 kids standing around watching this thing burn. So. Do you have any questions for me?
So with that, Councilmember Butler, would you go to start since you'd asked for this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Jericho, thank you so much. And I think we've talked, but I also want to make sure that everybody out there knows that I was actually just talking to a class today at WSU. Don't blame the police. The council is the one who, passes these ordinances, and we made those decisions. So it kind of stings me when I hear, well, the police are targeting this. No, they're enacting, they're enforcing what we, as a body, have decided. And Jericho, I know, and I have already heard this from so many people, I lost count, how amazing you are at what you do, and you're very level-headed, you don't target anybody. I think on our side, and part of the reason I brought this up is because we have heard from some citizens. I can't speak for the rest of the body. I've heard from some citizens about the feelings of punitive nature of this ordinance. And again, I made sure to let them know this is something that we passed. I think the challenge, especially as I've sat in this role as long as I have, is looking at the downstream effects of some of the decisions that we make as a body, unintended consequences. And I brought up last time that in the past I had placed indoor furniture on the outside. I don't do that anymore. Just want to make sure. But it was to illustrate that even those of us who are in this position, we've been in those positions where it's like, oh, yeah, this is, not right, especially with the laws and this. And originally, so this happened, 2007 was when the original ordinance for outside furniture, is that correct, or was that amended?
I have no idea.
Okay. Because I tend to recall that this was in relation to some couch fires a little later on. And not sure if Thad knows, but the point I'm making is that the original intent, I know when we were looking at this way back, we were in the old city hall. My belief was that it was to make neighborhoods look better and so on and so forth. And then fairly recently I was told, no, this was more in relation to couch fires and so on. The challenge for me, I think, is that the link between furniture being outside and fires happen, I think, may possibly, I don't know any studies that have been done at WSU, maybe an interesting project, I feel is somewhat erroneous. Correlation is not necessarily causation. And while it may be easier for people to grab something, it's also easier to light a lot of other things on fire. Just in my opinion, and I have no data on this, but couch fires were not a thing when I was going to WSU, or they weren't as prevalent when I was going to WSU from 2000 to 2005. I was a 5-year student. And that was not as much of a thing. And it started taking root, I think, sometime after 2010. I could be wrong on this. So I do have a challenge with this ordinance, not with what you're doing. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Because I do feel that when we enact an ordinance such as this, it does have those effects of, those are students who are paying, most likely going to be paying that price, whether they're intending to light a couch on fire or intending to sit on it. And from what I understand, you do a good job of trying to determine if it's being used as sitting and so on. And so as we move forward, I think it's important for us to look at this, and this is only one voice, and also be a little bit more careful as we look into ordinances that we pass and the possible downstream effects of those. So that's my piece right now.
Councilmember Guido.
Hi there, Mr. Holmberg. I guess I'm a little confused about the burning of the couch as it relates to this ordinance. Are they two separate things? I mean,
So I think kind of speak to what, Councilman Weller said about, the correlation, causation, all that. I'm thinking that if they want to drag a couch from inside of their house to burn it, they're going to find a way. So I don't necessarily think that one equates to the other, but I didn't write city code. I just know that in the nuisance ordinance, it specifically points out no indoor furniture stored outdoors. So whether or not they light it on fire, or whether or not people just in general think it looks kind of trashy, that's not a decision I made. It's just in the code, and so that's why I enforced it. My personal beliefs aside, when I pull up, I don't care. If I personally wouldn't sit on the couch outdoors because vermin, spiders, it gets rained on, it's kind of funky. But I mean, if that doesn't bother you, I don't care if you sit on the couch outside. And if I'm being fully honest, if I drive by a house and there's a couch outdoors and it's sitting under a porch or it's on their front porch, it's technically outdoors, I'm not going to really stop and drop the hammer on somebody. If I drive by the house and there's garbage all over and there's a couch there, at that point I'm like, hey, you got to do something with your garbage. And while I'm here, the couch. So the couch, it's not a primary stop point for me unless I drive by and I'm like, there is like cushions missing, what is it doing out here? At that point, my thought is it's garbage, which falls back into, don't store trash and garbage outside your house.
okay. So speaking of a citizen's concern, I think this also came up because several of us heard from a property owner who felt targeted and wondered how something could have been discovered when it was behind a fence. So that's kind of what that was the impetus for this. So just trying to understand how those things are monitored.
For sure. So, when you repeatedly go back to the same property for the same issues, you can see how people would feel targeted, but also not really. If you're continuing to have the same issue, if there's constantly garbage in your yard, and I'm constantly saying, hey, you can't have garbage in your yard, to me, I don't feel like that's targeted or retaliatory. I'm doing specifically what I am getting paid to do, which is enforce the nuisance ordinance. I know you're speaking of, and I spoke to him. He had asked me the question. He said, "How did you see it?" I put a fence up, and I said, "Well, that block is always a problem, and so it's on my radar." So I worked so hard to get the garbage and all of that cleaned up from the alleyway that now it's like if you slide back a little bit. Now it's like one step forward, two steps back. So you're always you have to maintain it at this point. Not to the point of nitpicking, but if you don't continually go up there, what my concern is okay. So it took me a couple of years to get that alleyway and that specific block kind of cleaned up. And if you don't stay on top of it, it just kind of slides right back into that. So he's not being targeted. Essentially, that whole block is being monitored by me because I put so much effort into trying to clean up specific areas of the hill that are consistently problem areas. So, I mean, I've been back there several times, but it's not targeted, but it is targeted. I mean, does that make sense? If there's continually a problem, I'm going to continually be back there, and we're going to continually have the same conversation. In reference to being able to see it, when you drive, he's since put up a gate. The gate wasn't there, so when you drive through, I'm like, there's couches back there, so let's go ahead and stop. And it's garbage was in the middle of it, and that was what instigated my initial, okay, so you got the garbage, and now you've got the couches, so now we're right back to where we were 3 months ago when I spoke to you about this, and then 3 months before that when I spoke to you about this. So it's there's some history there where I've been there a lot, and that's why the infraction. And I always try to tell people it's a big ticket. Go to court, talk to the judge, mitigate it. I don't care if you pay it. I don't care if he dismisses it. I've got no skin in the game. I just don't want to have the same conversation with you over and over and over. That is a little aggravating.
I appreciate it, Jared.
Yeah.
Councilmember Parks.
Thank you. Councilmember Polito basically addressed the issue that I was going to ask you about, and I appreciate your explanation of all of that. It helps a lot. I just want to say that I believe that these sorts of ordinances actually became more heightened after the riots in 1998. For those of you who were here, people lit dumpsters on fire and pushed them toward law enforcement and things like that. So I think that was the impetus of it, but probably also some later updates as well. But thank you.
Councilmember Gaither.
After speaking with community members and leaders, I'm going to say that from the conversations that I've had, as well as what the gentleman you all are referring to, it appears to me that nuisance code violations are not a significant concern among most residents, and here's why. Thank you, Chief, for providing this data. We're talking 140 warnings in 2022, 36 citations. In 2023, 61 warnings, 27 citations. In 2024, 67 warnings. I'm looking at 8 couches on fire since September 7th, 16 citations. So my question for you, it seems to me, I believe that when it comes to this nuisance code violation, nuisance code ordinance, you all are excelling in community policing. Can you talk for a minute about how community policing contributes to achieving non-voluntary compliance? Resolving issues through educating rather than punishing.
Yeah. So The initial response is not to issue an infraction. When I first started here, it was under Chief Jenkins and now Chief Offenworth. It's never been a situation of, hey, you're not issuing enough infractions. When I first started and I spoke with Chief Jenkins, his philosophy was, I don't care if you ever write one ticket, educate. Even if you don't get compliance, yeah, you might have to issue an infraction, but there's no expectation of revenue generation, of writing tickets. I mean, I can't speak for Jake, but I don't think Jake cares if I ever write a ticket. So, and I don't feel that pressure, but I also, when I was younger, I got in a fair amount of trouble. And so things like a little bit of trash in your yard and stuff like that, they're not like these big, like monumental, like, now you're going down for this kind of a thing. So for me, it's just the understanding, especially with the furniture, that not everybody knows that you can't have indoor furniture outdoors. So that one's an easy one. I don't go up and say, hey, you can't have a couch on the porch. And a lot of people are like, what? Why? I say, city ordinance, no indoor furniture stored outdoors. But, that's not really why I stopped. Why I stopped is all the garbage here. So to me, the common sense is you can't have garbage all over your yard. You shouldn't have to be told that. But even with that, there's no I see garbage on the ground, you're getting a ticket. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, this is like the 4th time I've been here, 3rd time I've been here. What are we doing? What are we missing here? If you guys want to party outside, take a garbage can and set it up out there. It's that simple kind of thing. So, but it's always trying to get them to comply without a monetary penalty. And to speak to the numbers, the 140 warnings and the 36 tickets and things like that. I started here in 2019, and you go out and you give warning after warning after warning after warning, and you don't get compliance. So before Liz left, what I spoke to her about was I said, I'm going to start issuing infractions to the property owner. And she said, okay. And my reasoning for that is each semester there's a whole new population of people that come in, and they live in a house, and they live there for a month, 2 months, the whole semester. But you might go back there after 3 months, and those same people are have moved out, moved in with a different friend. So it's like herding cats a little bit. So at the end of the day, the property owner, it's his property. So what I found is, and I think the numbers show it, that by issuing to the property owner, I started at the end of 2022, and then you can see that the warnings and the infractions go down. And then in 2023, you can see from 2023 to 2024 that they dropped even more. So a lot of people that do own properties around here, what I'm finding is they don't necessarily live in the city, so they might not even know what's going on at their property or what's happening. And what I think is happening is once I issue these infractions to the property owners, then they contact their property manager and they're like, what's going on over there, because I just got a ticket kind of a thing. But since I've started issuing the infractions to the property owners, what I do is I'll send out a letter that just says, hey, on such and such a day, at such and such time, I made contact at your property for a violation of Pullman City Code 1.50.05 or 5.01.050 number 2, number 19, whatever it is. And then I let them know that as per city code, they can be issued the infraction. So when they do get the infraction, they shouldn't be surprised. They should know that, hey, there's something going on my property. And what I'm hoping is, and what it looks like is happening, is they're taking a more hands-on approach to managing their properties, and maybe holding their property managers accountable, which in turn are holding maybe the residents accountable. So.
Councilmember Valera.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. And I think my question, was answered when Councilmember Guido was talking, but just to kind of ask it again. So if the indoor furniture is outside but not visible from the road, so if there's pedestrians, they aren't able to see the indoor furniture outside, would that still be a violation of the ordinance?
So it would, but I wouldn't go look over their fence to try to see it. what would happen is let's say if your neighbor, if they're in their second story of their house and they look over and they can see your couch, if they call it in, then at that point, yeah, I would go and make contact because it's in view of the public. Whether you can see it from the roadway, the alleyway, the sidewalk or whatever, in view of public just means anybody if they can see it from their house and they want to call it in, then I go make contact and say, hey, your neighbor called, you got couches in your backyard, I didn't see them, they did, can we move, can we do something with them?
Councilmember Waller.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate, Jericho, what you were saying regarding, it's not just the outdoor furniture. You're also looking at situational, what else is out there. And I'm really appreciative about Councilmember Gaither and him doing the data dive. That's really, really helpful to hear. I do think the root of this isn't whether the enforcement is being done or warnings are being given or any of those things for me. For me, is the root of it is not you doing your job. You obviously are, and you're giving chances. And I commend you for looking at the property owners as well, because that's something that hits the wall, and that's important. I feel the root of this for me is whether the ordinance that we decided on way back was something that should have been passed in the first place. And that, for me, is really the heart of the matter. And something along the lines of it being a piece of outdoor furniture being in the view of public, whether it's on, I have a deck, or a patio, or something along these lines. And somebody being able to call it in and say, I can see it. It's a challenge for me, this ordinance in general. And, this doesn't just cover couches from what I understand. It covers everything from, I gave an example previously where beforehand I would drag my, a chair out and TV and sit underneath summer night and watch a movie, or play games, Xbox, something along those lines. That would be in violation if it was within technically, correct?
Well, the way that I interpret it is no, because you're using it and it's not being stored out there. So if I drove by and you were just kicking it on your deck or whatever in a recliner watching TV, I wouldn't say anything, not a thing, because like I said, the way I interpret it, it's not being stored out there. You're using it out there, totally fine.
Now, if the recliner were to remain out there, let's say overnight, is that stored?
Yes. But again, I wouldn't bust your chops for that.
No, I know, but what I'm trying to get at is that even, if my butt isn't in the chair,
right,
that's a storage.
Right.
If the, kitchen table, whatnot, let's say I can't afford outdoor table, drag it out, have dinners, breakfast, whatever, out there, that's storage. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. So, I appreciate it.
Okay, Councilmember Gaither, did you? Okay. If not, looks like that's it. So thank you very much, Jericho. I appreciate your input. Anything else from staff? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So our next agenda item up is so it's the mayor's proposed 2025-2026 budget. I'm going to start with the budget letter and from there turn over to our Director of Finance and Administrative Services. So I'm pleased to present Pullman's 2025-2026 final budget, which reflects our best possible projection for the next year. Next year, still assessing the impacts of Washington State's slowing economic growth, reduced consumer spending, higher than U.S. average CPI and reduced forecast revenues. This is coupled with other agencies and businesses increasing their rates to compensate for their increased expenditures. Since former Mayor Johnson's last budget message 2 years ago, the city has experienced on a similar scale as other local agencies what is happening in our state. This budget reflects the input of 16 department managers working as a team under the very capable leadership of City Administrator Mike Urban, who prior to being City Administrator was our Finance Director. Our Finance and Administrative Service Director, Jeff Albrecht, took the leadership on this budget effort. I want everyone to know how much I appreciate their dedication and all the extra hours, time away from family and expertise in the formation of this budget. We spent many hours with our department leaders looking at their needs and their projected expenditures over the next several years. There's no doubt that in many cases, the justification for additional staff was there, but the anticipated revenues were not. This is the same for the minor capital purchases and need temporary shift B&O utility tax from the transit CPI, which has a strong reserve. We assure the departments, however, that we will continue to monitor our revenue picture in months ahead, and if there's a dramatic improvement on our projected revenues, we can react accordingly, and when justified, submit a budget adjustment to the council. Although there's many economic unknowns regarding the rest of 2024 and going into the next 2 years, the best possible projections were made using the most current and relevant information available at the time of producing this document. As we comply with state law and meet our budget deadlines, I want to remind the readers that we are facing a variety of challenges to this budget in the years ahead. For example, during this budget cycle, we'll be meeting and negotiating with 3-unit bargaining units, dealing with contracts that are or will be expiring. We're also fortunate to have an excellent and well-trained staff, and we desire to keep them. Our staff are our city's most important asset. For this reason, I've worked hard to deliver a budget that preserves existing positions and associated benefits, including 3% COLAs for non-represented staff in 2025 and 2026. This is the recommendation of the results of the 2023 salary survey. The city has experienced some dramatic cost increases from some of our partner agencies over the last several years, and that too is reflected in the budget. The county auditors continue to hike the price of elections. For example, in 2018, we were billed $30,985 for elections, and that's 2023. In 2025, we have 3 city council members up for election, and we try to project that expense, not knowing what the county will bill. Court costs have increased 15.7% from 2022 to 2025, despite a cordial rental agreement we provided the county. Our WIPCOM expenses continue to escalate as the 911 center attempts to keep and find emergency operators. And then there's insurance. Our liability insurance is projected at $1,629,894 for 2025. That's up from $453,350 in 2018. As a result, these expenses are increasing much more quickly than our share of the state legislature's established property tax income, which is limited to a 1% increase per year. Submitting a balanced budget requires cuts in many areas, which may affect services. For 2025, we're establishing the general fund revenue at $28,724,748, and the operational expenditures is projected to be at $30,875,817. For 2026, we're estimating revenue to be at $29,020,749, and expenditures are projected at $31,492,741. Looking back at previous budget messages, we've balanced our budget using reserves, and we're doing that again, but are at the end of our available reserves. Our track record so far has been excellent, even though when experiencing a pandemic, and in those years we proposed a budget reserve that was roughly at 13% range. Our last final budget was built using approximately 2 months reserves, or 13%. The reserves in this budget are also set at 13%, which meets the council's long-established goal, proven over the years through many challenges, to be more than adequate to run the city. This could not be done with any confidence without the outstanding cooperation of a great city staff and department managers who control their budgets, an exemplary finance staff, a responsible city council and administration that rejects attempts attempting requests and proposals to use short-term revenues for long-term commitments. The bond issue that helped us remodel our new city hall and provided much-needed recreational facilities for our residents also provided funds for the acquisition of land for a third fire station. A study by the fire department determined the ideal location for that third fire station that narrowed the site to some Washington State University property. The city continues to work with WSU to identify the best location. It may seem that it's taking longer than anticipated, but it also reflects the post-pandemic new normal project environment. As part of the bond, the public and especially our children in the last 2 years have seen new and safer playground equipment for most of our city parks. This includes playground equipment, restrooms, shelters, and walking paths. While in the midst of a recent budget challenges, we're encouraged by the excitement and bright spots centered around improved roads to the middle and high school, a new airport terminal, and soon-to-be completed downtown Pullman project. The roads improve safety for our next generation of leaders and their families. The airport terminal expands space, parking, and seating, and includes indoor jetways and baggage carousel. The downtown project replaces 100-year-old infrastructure, slows and quiets traffic, improves ADA accessibility, and expands sidewalks and outdoor business seating options. All three of these projects are ways the city is responsive to community needs and express desires, and shows how the city and staff work tirelessly to leverage the funds we have to provide the greatest possible community impact. I want to thank our wonderful community for the support we have received as we experience together a variety of challenges. While the pandemic is receding further into our rearview mirror, we are now firmly in a post-pandemic era, which is often different from the often fondly remembered pre-pandemic years. While we're in a new normal, I firmly believe that our success will be based on how well we work together as a community. There are many initiatives being worked on to build a community, common purpose, and collaboration, and I believe that our financial success is also rooted in these. The many positive comments we received from those visiting Pullman and those engaged in our community speaks to the good we are accomplishing and how important it is for us to continue to work together to make Pullman an even better place to live, work, study, and do business. And with that, you have the proposed budget in front of you, and I'll turn it over to our Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Jeff Albert.
Thank you, Council. Good evening. Just a little bit of a reminder of kind of where we are in the process and how we got here. So the budget process kicked off actually in June. It started with the council approving the budget calendar, and really today it's been a lot of the work's been on the staff side to develop the budget, evaluate those things, and compile it. So tonight's kind of the night where it shifts from staff to council's involvement. So just a little bit of a reminder of how we'll be working with council in the next few months as we look to target November as an approval budget date. So in 2 weeks we will have budget workshop, at which point we'll have about half of the city departments come present, share their thoughts, answer questions, and then the second night of that will be on Monday, November 4th. That is a special meeting. So it'll be the agenda item that night, and we'll have the other half. So that'll be a chance for department heads to talk to council, share their budget thoughts, and answer any questions. Tuesday, November 12th, will then is currently scheduled to be the public hearing to allow public comment on the budget. It'll also be the meeting that we would like to ask that property tax levies be set for 2025. So by state statute, tax levies have to be filed and completed by November 30th. Whitman County has asked that we do that by the 15th so that they can do their piece of it. So we ask that by November 12th that be done by council so we can get that to the county. And then currently on the schedule, the following week, Tuesday, November 19th, is where we potentially look to see if council would approve adoption of the budget. So gives you a little bit of kind of idea of what the next month and a half or so looks like to kind of get us to the final product.
So with that, any questions? I know we're going to be going through this budget, so this would be more of a high level of the process. Any questions you have related to the process or things like that? Seeing that, good job. And I'll have you pause up here, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adjourn the meeting and then open the Metropolitan Parks District. meeting, and with that, Ms. Giles Elliott, will you please call roll?
President Benjamin.
Present.
Commissioner Valera.
Here.
Commissioner Pajerin.
Here.
Commissioner Gaither.
Here.
Commissioner Guido.
Here.
Commissioner Parks.
Here.
Commissioner Weller.
Present.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
So the first item on the agenda is a motion to dispense with reading of the minutes of the Metropolitan Parks District Special Meeting September 24th, 2024, and approve them as submitted. Could I receive a motion? Motion second. With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the 2024 minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That on to the second item is the proposed budget, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, so just a reminder, and this is probably more for the public, the Metro Park District is a separate entity, it does kind of have a parallel process, a much less complicated system than the city does. So we'll follow the same process for that. The Metro Parks District really exists for the sole purpose of supporting parks projects for the city. So really what happens is revenues are collected there, and for the most part transferred over to the city to deal with that. So as you hear about expenditures for parks projects, that'll be talked about in the city, but will be quite often funded by Metro. The key date at the end of that is the property tax levy, to get that approved by the Metro Park Board and then submitted to the county.
And with that, any discussions related to the process for the Metropolitan Parks budget? Seeing none, I'll then adjourn the Metro Parks District meeting and then reconvene the City Council meeting. Thank you, Jeff. The next item is our consent agenda. And the items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by single motion of City Council without separate discussion. With that, I would entertain a motion to receive the consent agenda by title only.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
With that, if you could read our consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the regular meeting minutes of October 8th, 2024, and approve them as submitted. Item 2 is a motion authorizing Mayor to enter into an annual contract with Clarion Events Fire Engineering Training for use of online training platform for the fire department. Item 3 is a motion to authorize the Mayor and Financial and Administrative Services Director to procure a new street sweeper to replace sweeper number 17-070. Number 4, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks number 2011-2788 and 2011-2835, totaling $943,027.49. And finally, item 5 is a motion to approve disbursements for refund checks number 2011-2836 through 2011-2848, totaling $1,072.41.
Thank you. Do any council members desire to have any items removed from the consent agenda to be discussed separately? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
With that, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Next item up, we have a regular agenda. This is an ordinance 24-10. With that, I'll turn that over to Ted.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Officer Dalen, for setting this one up pretty well. This is related to, in part, to the nuisance code, because under Pullman City Code 1.02.130, the code allows for a certificate of correction. And at this point, it's unlimited. So in the instance of a repeat offender or one of the where the officer goes out multiple times, gives warnings, eventually issues a citation. If they clean it up, they can call and have the compliance officer come back out, code enforcement officer come back out, check, and then if it's cleaned up, the code enforcement officer has to issue a certificate of correction. Then the responsible person can take that certificate of correction to the district court, which acts as the city's municipal court, and have that citation dismissed. And so what has happened, and the reason for bringing this ordinance, updating this code, is to limit the number of these certificates of correction that can be issued in a single calendar year. And the reason for this is there have been instances where a single residence or single premises gets multiple citations in a single year because they get a citation, they clean it up. They get another citation, they clean it up. And so it isn't promoting compliance. It's just a way to avoid paying the fines. And so if they're unlimited, if they're entitled to unlimited certificates of correction, then it doesn't really promote compliance, and which is what we found. And this came to a head recently when there was there were multiple challenge citations, and because the code enforcement officer had not gone out every time he was requested, because there was continuing and there was multiple and continuing ongoing violations, the court dismissed all of them, because saying that the section 1.02.130 required the code enforcement officer to go out there and issue a certificate of correction. So what we've done is just amended the ordinance just a little bit to again limit the number of certificates of correction that can be issued for a specific premises and or responsible person.
With that, any discussion? Councilmember Weller?
Question. I appreciate that. Can you clarify certificate of correction? Does that mean, for instance, one of our officers goes out and says you have a warning? Is that a certificate of correction? No.
No, sorry. Thank you for the question. What it is it's after an infraction or citation has been issued. The homeowner, property owner, or responsible person can clean it up. For instance, let's just say it's accumulated garbage, and Officer Dalen goes out, issues it after multiple warnings, as he discussed, goes out and issues a citation for a code infraction. The responsible person who that's issued to can clean it up and say, hey, will you come back out and re-inspect? I cleaned everything up. And then the code enforcement officer will go back out, and if it's all cleaned up, they issue the certificate of correction, which then the responsible person will take to the district court and submit it, and then the citation or the infraction is dismissed.
Okay. So essentially, we're penalizing somebody for cleaning up the mess.
No, that's not true. Because they get it one time, and the problem is the messes reoccur multiple times. So they get one time, they get to clean it up, and per year, and get a certificate of correction.
So they can clean it up once, and if they make another mistake, it's no-go.
They violate the Pullman City Code, and an infraction is issued, and they've already received a certificate of correction in that calendar year, they have to pay the fine.
Just a comment, because those were two questions. I don't like this. Is this under Washington code, or we're just saying this is what we feel?
This is Pullman City Code.
I don't like this.
Councilmember Delira?
Yeah, so I think my question was answered, but what I was gonna ask is, we're going from unlimited certificates of correction to just one. Is the way it's written in the ordinance we're about to close on?
Yes.
And, is it possible to increase from one to another amount?
Council can do whatever it wants.
Councilman Pajero?
Thank you. I'm just going to throw my thoughts in here. I do support this resolution given the fact that it can be taken advantage of, as we've seen with the unlimited certificate of correction that can be issued. I did see that this ordinance is set to be effective 5 days from now. Given that this is such a big change, I personally would support being effective at the start of the new year, just so it gives the community enough time to understand that this is a new policy moving forward. I'd like to propose that to my other council members as well.
So we have a motion. So we're still in discussion. We have a motion. Councilmember Parks.
Thank you, and thank you, Officer Phelan, for your information. That's really helpful, actually, hearing from your experience in the neighborhoods. My question is, going from unlimited to 1 year to one-time year seems harsh, and the thought that comes to mind is, as Officer Phelan mentioned, we often have turnover in residences, in occupancies, typically at semester break. So I'm just wondering if we could amend, and this is just a discussion, I'm not suggesting this, but if the language could be amended to either 2 per year or 1 in a 6-month period. And that sort of allows for this group of people being held to the one time, but then if the property changes over somewhere later, it could even be in the summertime, then that sort of focuses on a different issue. So that's the one thing I thought, that's sort of, I don't know if that adds a lot more work or.
And I might bring up the chief on this one. I think this is similar to the parking, with resetting parking tickets where it's very difficult to reset multiple times in a year. With our current
January, June, and July, and December.
Well, I think our current system to be able to look up. So
okay.
if you can speak to whether that's something within our system we can easily do or not, because I know we had challenges related to resetting parking.
Right, so whatever council decides, we can make work. So it's something that we can track with our records management system. So whatever is decided, if it's one correction every 6 months, and then we can see in our records when they had their last correction, or if it's one calendar year, again, it's easy to look at.
So we'll continue on discussion. So Councilmember Delira?
Yeah, I would also be in favor of increasing 1 to possibly 2, and I also agree with the idea of starting the enforcement to the start of the next year, to have community members become more educated that this is the change that will be going forward.
Okay. Any other? Oh. Councilmember Weller?
So, question that you had brought up one example of where this has gotten us kind of, as the reason that we're changing. Are there any others?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can tell you that, and maybe the department knows better, but the one that I'm talking about, there was 7 or 8 pending ones, and they weren't 7 or 8 for the same thing. They were 7 or 8 different situations, and we Officer Dalen and I, and then also Liz, had to attend probably 3 hearings on that. And so there was multiple hours of our time invested in that. And so it was a kind of a draw on their time, city attorney's time, and the court's time. So, but they may know better if there's repeat offenders out there.
Are there,
Can I say something? Can I ask a question?
Well, let's let them answer, and then I have.
Well, I'll let Jericho answer, but my thoughts on it are, as you've already heard, when we receive a complaint about a nuisance code violation, our first response is always to educate and try to get compliance, followed with typically several warnings. So before it even gets to that enforcement piece, Jericho and his crew have already talked to these people multiple times. They know what the rules are and the expectations are. And it's only when we're pushed do we move to that enforcement piece. And even at that point, they get a ticket, they still have a process they can go through by going before talking to the judge and seeing where that goes. So from what I understand, Jericho can answer this probably better when it comes to the notice of corrections. What I believe is happening is it's just one more way for somebody to get a notice of correction that's automatically dismissed. They can avoid that court process, but then they go right back and do it again. So somebody throws a big party, leaves a mess in the yard, they know they shouldn't do that, they get a ticket, they clean it up, it goes away, and then next weekend they do it again. But Jericho might be able to answer better on that.
No, Jake did a pretty good job. Essentially what happens is like I said with before about, there's warning, and then there's also, if you do get an infraction, there's already a process in place where you can go to court and the judge can, you can mitigate it, you can contest it, you can do whatever you want. So my thought on the whole section of certificate of correction is it's arbitrary anyways. It's in there when it doesn't necessarily need to be in there, but the way that it's worded is that anytime that somebody is issued an infraction, we go out and we issue this, we look at the property, and if it's all cleaned up and everything, the wording in the city code says we shall issue the certificate of correction. And there's no stop going on. It's in perpetuity forever and always. So realistically what you could have is you could go to somebody's house every weekend for garbage in their yards. And you could give them a ticket every weekend. And let's say on Monday they clean it all up. Now you go back and you issue the certificate of correction because you shall issue it. What my thought was choking that back to 1 year, especially in light of the fact that now we're issuing to the property owners. The idea behind it is issuing to the property owner the infraction. They'll help get that pre-education out there that, hey, in your lease it says that, you don't have furniture outdoors, you clean up your garbage, you do this, you do this, you do this. Because essentially what it turns us into is property managers for the whole city. And there's already people that have that job. So what I'm trying to do is get them to kind of help, shoulder some of that burden and take responsibility for the properties that they're getting paid to maintain. So that's kind of where it all comes from. My hope is that we kind of come in on infraction of property owner, and you'll have this time period where everybody's like, this is awful, I don't want to do this, it's terrible, everybody's mad, and I get that. But it's like any corrective action, it sucks at first, but eventually you get to the point where it's the accepted practice and everybody's used to it, and now you don't have to write all these tickets. I might not have to ever write another ticket, which would be absolutely fine with me. That's the end goal. It doesn't feel awesome to walk up to somebody and say, hey, here's $500, have a good day. It's not awesome. So I would just rather not. And that's why I started issuing the property managers, but you have some of these property owners that have found out about this loophole is essentially what it is. And the person that is referencing, all of the infractions were for properties that they manage. And so now that they know that they can get this forever and always, every time you go up there and you write an infraction, or you give a warrant, or you do anything, any kind of enforcement, they flop back on that and say, okay, we got it cleaned up, can we give you my certificate of correction? And to me, if that is how it's going to stay stated in city code, you've essentially taken away any enforcement action that we can take, because there's no penalty. So you can continue this bad behavior in perpetuity forever and always. So what I'm trying to do, what I spoke to that about, was getting it limited to one. If you think that once or two a year, every semester, that's fine, but not so that it's just always. If that makes sense.
Councilmember Wright, and then we'll go.
Thank you, Jericho. You're doing a great job, and I appreciate your outlook on how to solve this problem. I guess a couple of questions that I have. One related to something that Nathan brought up is about how many of these do we issue, these certificates of correction? Do we issue a year?
So far, there's only one property manager that knows about these, and they're kind of one of the harder ones that we deal with, trying to put it kind of nicely. And the fact that now that they've learned about this, 9 times out of 10, when I have contacted a property, it's the property that they are managing. And so it's not so much everybody else. There's a few in town that are just really good at, you never have contacts with them. There's a few that once in a while you have them, but there is one specifically that we are always in contact with. And they're the ones that are like, give me my certificate of correction every single time. So the one problem child is the one that you can't correct their behavior, because they have this essentially get out of jail free card that they just flop on the table every time. They're like, bingo. So,
and you know, it's difficult because we've got one or a limited number of offenders, and it has the eventuality of affecting everybody.
Right.
And I don't think any of us want to do that. I would be in favor of both aspects that my two council members brought up as well, and one is to delay the effectiveness or the effective date to January 1, and then I like the idea of one semester, mainly based on the turnover that occurs, and so I think maybe that's the most charitable maybe and realistic approach until we get this education reestablished. So that's where I would be on that. And again, thank you for your explanation.
As this discussion goes around for the council's consideration, doing this by the semester puts an extra burden on the police department, having to keep track of what day the semester starts, what day the semester ends, and maybe doing it in a series by a calendar to make it easier for operations.
Councilmember Gaither.
Yeah, I'm just conflicted because I support the notion of starting it in January, and also support increase it, having one per semester. I see both sides. I see, okay, we want to change the entire ordinance behind one individual. At the same time, when I look at the numbers, we're talking about 67 warnings and 16 citations. From what Jericho is saying, those citations come mainly being the same property owner. We are talking about 16 citations year to date, and 8 couches were set on fire. We're talking about 8 couches set on fire. That seems like pretty good community policing to me. It sounds like a whole lot of warnings are being given. It sounds like a lot of leeway is being given, and I've spoken to community members and community leaders. I haven't heard anyone say that a nuisance code violation is a significant concern, not among students, no one. And so allowing for multiple certificates for repeat violations, I can see how that also discourages proactive compliance and undermines the law enforcement's objective of educating first, giving a warning first. Giving a citation if the warning, if they don't follow through with the warning, and then, okay, well, if we have to give a citation 1 or 2 a year, it just makes sense. I support the notion of 1, to be honest with you. Because giving them, it's on here, 67 warnings for 16 citations year to date, 61 warnings in 2023 to 27 citations. There's already a lot of warnings, but at the same time, I get it, and I support it. I support what the council, whatever the council decides, but I do see both sides of this.
Councilor Waller?
Yeah, so Councilmember Gaither had said some of what I was feeling, and this is why I asked, and this is why I'm starting to ask, when we make changes, what is the impetus for us to make those changes? And in my opinion, this goes back to what I was saying before. Going through an ordinance change, creating a new ordinance, we need to have more than just one individual who may have found a loophole in order to change an ordinance like that. Because we're going to, if we find a situation where, let's say John and Jane have a party for, their daughter, leave their stuff out, there's trash around, they don't clean it up, come around, they get a ticket, they're too tired, they can't, put away all this stuff. They have indoor furniture outside, the whole thing, and then it's stored. They clean it up, they get a certificate, they cleaned it up, then it happens another time, maybe a 4th of July or something, but they can't. It is just, it's too much, in my opinion, to be changing an ordinance of this nature based on one bad participant. It's too much. And I understand, the education, and I hear about the warnings and everything, but it's not enough for us to make these changes. And I support the police, I support what you're doing. I just don't see it. If the wording is something where shall should be changed to may, then I could see supporting something along, and okay, go ahead, Pat. Yeah.
My concern with may versus shall is then it's up to the individual to determine whether or not. And
I trust
unless we give, I know, I trust him too, but unless we give objective, like you have to do X, Y, and Z, and there's objective things to look at, that may is just giving it to discretion of whoever's in that position, and that can create a lot of issues. Because whenever you give someone in law enforcement discretion, it can create problems. And I'm not saying that law enforcement is doing something wrong, but from the public, they will view that discretion as, they can view it in many different ways. And so,
I appreciate that view, and I appreciate that perspective and what you're saying. I just feel that one per year is not enough, not only with student population, but this isn't only going to affect student population, this affects the entire city. And so, this is a lot. And increasing may be better, definitely an extensive amount of education is important, but it doesn't sit right.
Councilmember Parks.
Thank you. First of all, I want to clarify, my suggestion was in fact January to June, July to December, so it's not really tied to semesters, but it does include the movement within them. That was my thought. Secondly, like our lawn watering program, when we made a pretty drastic change a few years ago. We did have a pretty aggressive and robust public education campaign. So I feel like the city, with our communications person, can get that out. I do understand and I do agree that sort of punishing everyone for the actions of one is not extremely desirable. However, first of all, now that we've had this conversation, more people are going to know. But also, our city has grown a lot. We have a lot more properties now for code enforcement to patrol and to look over. So I'm okay with at least taking it down from unlimited, and I think 2 per year per property is reasonable. And at that point, the property manager may need to change their lease language to say, if you get more than this, and now it's on you. I mean, there are things that the property owner can do as well, and have the property manager enforce it that way.
For example, you entertain a motion, are you making a
So
motion?
I'm going to call the question, unless there are any other.
There's no second yet to call the question.
I think.
No, that just means let's wrap it up.
Well, so I need a motion.
But Tremaine has, I'd like to hear Tremaine.
Well, you can make a motion at any time, and once the motion is made, discussion, there's still time for discussion. So, Councilmember Davis, discussion doesn't end with making the motion.
Yeah, 2 questions. To Councilmember Weller's point, that is something that I think about when I think about this, changing an ordinance when it's kind of out in the open that we're changing the ordinance for one bad actor. Like, I don't know if I wonder if that's the wrong precedent as well, setting the wrong precedent that we would change an ordinance behind. Second question, Officer Jericho, just to confirm, when you issue citations to the property owner, you do not also issue citations to the tenant as well. It's one or the other?
It is. So, for an example is a fraternity. I won't give an address or anything, but there's a fraternity up there that we were consistently having problems with. Overflowed garbage, blowing out in the alleyways, blowing over into next people's yard, things like that. And you write them one infraction, and you've got 30 or 40 people in there, $500 ticket. They're like, hey, everybody, ante up your $15. We got a ticket to pay. So what the city code allows is the city code allows you to write for every individual that lives in the house. So they're not going to give you all their names. So then what you do is you go through and you look at license plates and you run names, and then you come back later with like 25 tickets. So now you've got these 25 tickets, you're up to like $15,000. Now you've got their attention, and now they come in and they want to have the conversation. Whereas before, they're not going to return the call. So then when they come down and they finally speak with you, I literally always tell them, go over to court, talk to them, and mitigate it. The intent is not for you to pay all these tickets. That's insanity. And I doubt the judge is going to require you to do that. So what I've done is, instead of doing that, instead of trying to figure out everybody that lives there, the stop point is the property owner. So it's one ticket, goes to him, and that's it. He might have 5 or 6 people in the house, and we can realistically write to all of them, but I don't do the property owner.
And the thing to understand with this, I want to speak to this question about, is this because of one issue? What this is our attorney is bringing to us saying there is a problem with how things are written. And they've identified that it's being taken advantage of because of how it's written. And in order to correct this so it can't be taken advantage of, this is the recommendation. So this is what's the recommendations coming forward, because it's not because of one specific actor that's causing it. It's because we've identified that there's this problem with how the code is written, and so that's why it's here. Yeah, Councilmember Parks.
I just have one more comment. I agree. I understand what the council is saying, but I also think that if this is important enough that staff have brought it forward as an issue, and it's gone through our legal attorney, I do believe that we should hear that, even though I just think that's important. It wouldn't come up otherwise. If they're bringing it to us, I feel like we should. So I'm going to make a motion that we adopt an ordinance 2410 with one amendment, which would be that instead of one per calendar year, it be changed to 2 per calendar year to a single person or to a single premises cited. And that period would be January to June and July to December.
Second.
Is this something, so I'm looking to add,
No, I wonder, do we have to amend it?
or whether this has to come back to us? Whether it has to go back to another meeting.
Well, 2 things. One is, I think the effective date, I don't know if you wanted to have the effective date, but also, I think instead of saying 2 per calendar year and then saying 1 for, it should say 1 for the period of January 1 through June 30, 1 for the period of July 1 through December 31. And to be effective January 1, 2025. What I understand.
Can I have it in order? Move to adopt ordinance number 2410 with period being changed from 1 certificate per calendar year to 2 certificates, 1 for the term January 1 to June 30th, and 1 for term July 1 to December 31 per single person or single premises, and with an effective date of January 1, 2025.
Second.
Good. With that discussion, Councilmember Waller.
I'd like to ask that, since it has already come up, that one of the main reasons is a single individual. Is this legal? Because it seems like targeting.
I need to clarify. This isn't targeted at a single person. The issue arose bringing to our attention the fact that the ordinance, the way it is currently written, allows this to happen. And it happened to be in a situation where the judge on a specific case said the way the court interpreted the language is that every single time someone calls, the code enforcement officer shall go to that property, shall issue a citation of correction, or a certificate of correction. So, no, we aren't targeting it at a specific address or person. It's that the issue arose because of one situation.
I'm sorry, it's important that I further clarify that. This isn't one person, it's different addresses, it's one property manager. So the infractions are happening at the ground level, here, and here, but this one property manager knows the piece. So it's not targeted at one person.
But that's one person.
No, because it's to the owner. It's multiple owners.
Yes. But it's one property manager.
Property managers manage many properties for many different people. Sometimes it's multiple owners, sometimes it's one owner, so that the effects are happening on the ground in multiple places.
Okay, but the information we received was that it was one manager that was learned about it, taking advantage of the loophole. Is that correct?
Yeah, this manager is the one that has pointed out that there's a issue with our ordinance, which we're asking to fix tonight.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, it's one person.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I support this. You know, again, I did my due diligence because I wanted to know how many warnings were given, how many citations were actually given. Are we talking about a large number? Are we talking about, again, as Jericho mentioned, are we talking about officers going out trying to make, you know, income or revenue off of citations? And that's what I'm seeing. It's just not the case. It's this current ordinance allows for multiple certificates for repeat violations, and I do see it as a loophole that does discourage compliance and undermines our law enforcement objectives. And I see the law enforcement objective is to, one, educate, two, issue a warning, and three, if it comes to it, issue a citation in which they will have one certificate of correction per 6 months. And that sounds reasonable to me. I think us pushing it to January 1 gives us some time to educate the community on this ordinance change, but it does seem to me to be a clear loophole. Again, we're talking 2023, 61 warnings for 27 citations. We're talking year-to-date 67 warnings for 16 citations, all by the same property management agency, all by the same property management agency.
I know that wouldn't be all by the same.
The citations?
That's citations, and be careful that's not the case.
That's not the case? All property managers? Okay.
The citations are not necessarily all to the same.
That can include couch fires.
The citations are, okay. So this is not related to one. Understand, the focus is a loophole's been identified, and this is being brought to us. We need to fix the loophole. Regardless, this is the loophole issue.
And I just have one point of clarification. The language actually in this ordinance does not say shall, it says will in both instances. So that has been addressed.
The court interpreted that as shall.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So it's still in place for this just any other discussion?
Mayor, if I could add one more thing.
Please.
It's not uncommon for a legislative body in response to a specific court case to amend or add new legislation in response to that one court case. This is not targeting because it applies evenly to everyone in the city of Pullman. It's not just identifying a single person and holding them to a different standard than everyone else in the community. It's that a case came up with multiple infractions. The court interpreted the Pullman City Code differently than I had because I read will as well. I didn't read that as shall. And so when that happened, we realized that unless it's the city's intent to offer as many as someone asked for, then we need to change the language of the ordinance to limit that number. If that's the intent, if the intent is to limit it, then we need to change the language. If the intent is to offer as many certificates of correction as someone asked for, then there's no need to change it.
Councilor Guido.
Thank you for the clarification, and I'm in favor of the motion as it was presented. I think this is a language issue. I think it's a loophole that was identified, and I think we need to encourage compliance.
With that, all those in favor of passing the motion as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
That it passes. With that, we have no new business or other business to come before us. Before we adjourn, just tentative dates. Remember that next Tuesday is our open house town hall at the senior center. It starts at 6, so 6 to 8. I encourage the public to attend. Our next regular council meeting will be Tuesday, October 29th. That is with our legislators. And then also there's budget work. And then the next meeting is going to be on Monday because Tuesday is an election. And notice that is a 6 p.m. start, not a 7 o'clock start, that Monday, November 4th. With that, I entertain a motion for adjournment. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.
We got us a little after interview. Let's see if we can.
Jericho. Yes, sir. I know you better not get weird. Okay.
Sad interview with see it again. Kind of interesting. Just pretty smart. She had a big work perpetuity.
I handle a lot of the back end stuff now. I still get out, I still do enforcement, I still be proactive, I still respond to calls. But there's me as a supervisor, then we have the person that walks me out now meeting, which just chunks my race. I see. Yeah, thank you. And then 2 people are sort of control officers for code enforcement. There are 4 of us, but typically you only see 2 rounds.
Okay, I have one question for you. Do you hope this approval of this ordinance will make your job easier?
It's not about making it easier. It's about how I not everybody is willing to speak. There is enough. So they call me to come out and have those conversations. It's not about easy, what's easier, what's not easier. I'm here 10 hours a day. It's my biggest issue is trying to mitigate the effect it has on other people. So let's say you're lid off your garbage can. The wind blows because it always blows here. So or the squirrels get into it, or the crows pick out your magpies or whatever. They pick it up, they pack it over your neighbor's property. Now your trash has become their trash. Because there's no way for us to say, hey, that piece of paper and that cup over there belongs to you. There's no proof of that. So for me, my biggest thing is what do you do to affect others? And that's why I'm glad you could pass it, because you have all these issues with trash. And you don't want to just look up. Indoor furniture, like I said, I'm not going to stop indoor furniture outdoors. We're supposed to participate, but that's minor. I mean, what? Everything else looks good? Yeah. Awesome. So for me, it's just don't do stuff that's gonna disrupt your neighborhood.
Yeah. Engineer Town Officer Dalen? Delaney. That's a nice to meet you.
That's kind of a cool interview. Alright, we out.